I was expecting mostly a story of romance, maybe even romantic comedy when I started watching the Korean drama known as When Life Gives You Tangerines. However, I was not expecting a show that would pull on my heartstrings so much that would make me feel like it's leaving an impression on me that I will remember to my core for the rest of my whole life. So I'll just start this video off with what I said in the thumbnail, which is that When Life Gives You Tangerines is a masterpiece. I have some ideas lined up for YouTube videos, and this was not on that mental list, which goes to show just how impactful it was for me personally. I'll describe this show without any spoilers in this video, and will put into words as best as I can to tell you if this is something you definitely should be checking out. Along with being a romance and drama, When Life Gives You Tangerines is described as a slice of life TV show, which Wikipedia describes as a depiction of mundane experiences in art and entertainment. And this just means that the show is meant to portray a lot of day-to-day activities for the protagonists as regular people that we can all relate to. So the whole show is all about falling in love, taking care of a family, and life decisions, and how they could take you literally to your grave. When the show first came out, the episodes were released in batches of 4. The first 4 episodes released on March 7th, the next 4 released a week later on March 14th, then the 21st, and then the 28th, for a total of 16 episodes for what Netflix refers to as a miniseries. I don't really get that, to be honest, because the episode lengths at worst are 49 minutes and at best are 85 minutes or an hour and a half. These episodes are often feature length, which sometimes makes the episodes themselves feel like you're watching a movie and not a segment of a series. But that's not a bad thing. That's something that I mean favorably for this show. The direction, the cinematography, the dialogue, including the narration, and especially the acting is masterclass. IU plays Oh Ae-sun, the main protagonist of the show, and Park Bo-gum plays Yang Gwan-sik, the deuteragonist. We see both Ae-sun and Gwan-sik all throughout the major stages of their life, starting from childhood, then to a little bit of the teenage years, to young adulthood, to grown adulthood, to middle-aged, and even to elderly age. The romance side of this show is obviously between Ae-sun and Gwan-sik, and to me, it's Gwan-sik who catches feelings first. But the remarkable thing is that Gwan-sik, to me, seems to have been in love with Ae-sun from the beginning of the show. Like right from when the two little characters are on screen together, which goes to show how deep his feelings for her have always been. He spends the whole show doing everything within his ability as he can for Ae-sun's own contentment. Very early on in Ae-sun's life, she's had a very tragic life. Her family doesn't really treat her all that well either, but Gwan-sik's always there for her. Like whenever he can be there for her, he is there for her. That's why I said he's been in love with her for practically his entire life, ever since he's known her. A lot of the episodes take place on Jeju Island, where both of the main characters are from and where their families reside. The actors and their delivery of the well-written dialogue makes it both thought-provoking and down-to-earth simultaneously. And oftentimes, just watching the show is a spectacle because you see a lot of the countryside, a lot of the time by the water and on the boats, and a whole lot of seafood. Jeju Island is an island after all, so a lot of the locals are fishermen. In fact, the notion of owning a boat and being a fisherman is, I'd say, pretty important to the story too. So if you're a fan of seafood, this show might just make you crave it. The whole show does not take place only on the island though. You'll also see the characters travel to Busan and eventually to Seoul too. And as much as I love this show, there was a certain aspect of its storytelling methods that I felt like were overdone and excessive. Even then though, because of how good this show is, there is not much bad to say about it, but whatever I did find as its imperfections is what I'm going to talk about now. I mentioned how you see Ae-sun and Gwan-sik in several different stages of their life, as well as how episodes of this show were released in batches of 4 over the course of about a month. While they do show the portrayal of him and her chronologically, in almost every episode I can recall instances where the show will take the narrative and will then transition to either a flashback to the past or a flash forward to the future. And I know the reason why this show does this is to reinforce whatever is being delineated in the current narrative of whatever episode the viewer is watching. But like I said, I think it's done too much. And because of that, the emphasis of that storytelling method just gave me the feeling that the timeline of the show is just jumping around too much. It was an effective storytelling method, but at times it just came off as superfluous. So it's just that aspect itself of one of this show's storytelling methods that I say worked against it sometimes. Another storytelling method I want to talk about, which is kind of related to the first one I described, is another one that bothered me. So basically, there are instances where during the current narrative of an episode, you'll see characters interacting, but you won't see the resolution to it. Now, sometimes in these instances, you will see the resolution in the same episode, but just in a later scene. But in other times in these instances, you will not see the resolution until a whole different stage of Ae-soon's and Gwan-sik's lives, in a much later episode. And in both cases, I find myself feeling like most of the time, they could have just shown the full resolution of the original scene in its entirety right there, instead of splitting up the part to bring the scene back for later. I just thought, in several of these cases, that it was kind of unnecessary. There is a lot of tragedy and serious situations that happen throughout the show. However, the show not only jumps around in the timeline, but sometimes it also skips around while the narrative focuses on a tragic or serious situation that Ae-soon and Gwan-sik are dealing with, and it feels like there isn't enough payoff for those situations because of how intense the scenes are, and you want to see more of a development there before the narrative moves on to the next story beat. Do you know what I mean? I get that it might sound unclear from the way I'm explaining it, but I'm doing my best to put this all into words without also putting spoilers in my words too. Because of course, it'll make sense when and if you watch the show, whether or not you agree with this criticism. Another thing is that early on in the show, Gwan-sik mentions the fact that he's 19, and I thought to myself, this dude does not look 19. Yes, he looks young, but he does not look that young. But I get it, because they wanted Park Bo-gum to play the character both in his young adulthood and grown adulthood, and then had Park Hae-joon play Gwan-sik in his middle age and elderly age, so this is only like half a criticism. I can make an exception. But those are pretty much the only unfavorable things I have to say. The show isn't rated R for television, but even then, there is no nudity and practically no sexual content whatsoever. And in a world where society is obsessed with that type of content, I really appreciated the lack thereof in this show. I'm never sitting down to watch sexual stuff when I want to watch TV, so massive kudos to Lim Sang-chun, the writer, and Kim Won-seok, the director, for keeping that out of this show. So as I said, family and the importance of closeness to family collectively, it's one of the main themes of When Life Gives You Tangerines. And as great as the show is at conveying that message, there are some parts of the character arcs that left me desiring more. From a young age, we see Ae-soon and how close she is with her mom, but her dad is already deceased when the show begins. What I would have liked is one scene, just one scene, in a flashback of Ae-soon and her dad. Whether it could have been in the very beginning, or at any other point of her life that the show depicted where such a scene could have just fit right in. But I guess the showrunners just didn't think it was that important. So that's not really a criticism per se, because the show already succeeds so high even without that, but that's just something in my opinion that would have made watching it even better. Ae-soon's actress IU also plays Gyeom-myung, Ae-soon's adult daughter, in the episodes of the later storylines, which I was not aware of when I first started watching the show. When Gyeom-myung was getting a lot of screen time and even was the main character for several episodes, my wife and I kept remarking on how much she looks exactly like her mother in her youth. When Gyeom-myung is on screen with her mother, Ae-soon, she's played by Moon Suri in her middle age and also later in her elder age. So before I looked up the casting of the show, I was just thinking the actress that played young adult Ae-soon and adult Gyeom-myung must be like sisters in real life or something for how uncanny their resemblances are to one another. But then I looked up the casting and realized that young adult Ae-soon and Gyeom-myung are in fact both played by the same actress. I suppose if I knew that before watching, I wouldn't have been thrown off as much as when I found out. And speaking of watching it, my wife was the one who discovered the show and she prefers the dub, so that's how she watched it. But I prefer watching the sub. So after she put me onto it and had a reason to watch it a second time, she got to experience both the sub and the dub. You don't necessarily have to be into Korean drama as a genre in and of itself to enjoy the show. If a slice of life show sounds appealing to you, as well as a story of showing how strong the bonds of both romantic love and the story for family can be in a heartfelt, wholesome manner, then I definitely think this is a show you have to check out. In my opinion, watching the sub is how you get the full acting experience, so that's why I prefer watching that. But of course, the dub is much more convenient, so if you're not fluent in Korean but you are interested in a show like this based on everything I said, then you're good watching either way. It just comes down to your viewing preference. Even though my wife and I discovered the show well after all the episodes were released, we still watch only 1 or 2 episodes a day. Every episode is either too feature length or so full of scenes that'll bring you to tears that it's just kind of hard, or at least for us, together, it was hard to watch more than 1 or 2 a day. I haven't given a score for any of the past movies or TV shows I reviewed, but I did give Hurry Up Tomorrow, the album, a score, and I feel compelled to just give Thank You for Your Hard Work, as it's known in Jeju Korean, a 9 out of 10. This show is a masterpiece. Reading up about it, I see that a lot of the critics compared it to another Korean drama that has Park Bo-gum in it too, and I might check that show out just from this word of mouth. But that's pretty much it. If you liked this video and watched it all the way to the end, thank you very much. I truly appreciate that. Leave a comment below if you've either watched the show or have decided to check it out after I recommended it. And as always, until next time, holla at your boy.